What is up, guys? MCMMA here, and in today's video I am going to be looking at today's UFC champions compared to the champions in each division from 10 years ago. I'm going to match them up for each division. I'm going to go over who I think would win and why. Just a little disclaimer, this list is based off who the champion of each division was exactly 10 years ago. So on November 21st, 2015 is going to be whoever was the champ in each division. Just for some clarification, because I know that there were a couple belts that exchanged hands at the end of 2015, so just wanted to make that clear. All right, first off, in the flyweight division, we have got the current champion, Alexandre Pantoja, taking on the former longtime champion, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. This is probably one of the closest matchups on paper, and I mean, this would be an absolute dream fight. Two of the greatest, or the two greatest flyweights of all time going at it. Would be such a sick fight, but I would lean towards Mighty Mouse here. I would go with Mighty Mouse by decision. The main reasons I think that Mighty Mouse would win this fight is because I think that his striking is a lot cleaner and crisper than Alexandre Pantoja's. And I think that he would be able to defend a lot of Pantoja's offensive grappling, because that's how Pantoja tends to win his fights. He walks guys down, he takes them down, and then he kind of balls them on the ground for the most part. But Mighty Mouse is a super, super high-level grappler, so I don't think that Pantoja would be able to dominate him on the ground the way that he does most of his opponents. And in a fight that would play out, that I think would play out mostly on the feet, I think that Mighty Mouse would have the advantage. So I think that he would win this fight by decision, probably like a 48-47 or a 49-46. But this would be such a sick fight. I wish that we could have seen it. I know Pantoja called out Mighty Mouse after he beat, I think it was Kaya Sakura, but Mighty Mouse retired. He's not coming back. This would still be a sick fight, though, and I think it's definitely one of the more interesting matchups that we have here today. All right, next up, we've got the current Bantamweight champion, Merab Dvalishvili, would be taking on the former champ and one of the greatest Bantamweights of all time, TJ Dillashaw. This is another fight that would be such a sick matchup. We maybe could have seen this one if TJ hadn't fucked up his shoulder so badly, but I would go with Merab here purely because I just don't think any bantamweight ever could beat Merab, and Merab is basically in his prime right now. It really only looks like he's getting better from fight to fight. So, I mean, TJ Dillashaw, especially at this point, was an absolute fucking killer. I mean, he was coming off of his 2 wins over Renan Barão, who was one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the entire UFC, and TJ dominated him twice, so he was in a great spot in late 2015, but I still think that Merab would get it done. I mean, like I said, Merab is just so dominant, like unbelievably dominant, and I think with the pace that he pushes, I think with his cardio and all of that, I just don't think that anybody could ever beat him. And even a guy like TJ Dillashaw, who we know has great cardio and is an absolute beast, I still think that he would gas out. I think he would end up gassing out to Merab, and I really think it doesn't matter how skilled you are. If you can't put him out cold, I think that's the only way to beat Merab, is to put him out in the early rounds. And TJ just doesn't have the power to do that, so I don't think that he would be able to win this fight, and Merab by decision is the pick here. All right, next up, in the featherweight division, we've got actually the first of two matchups that I've got here, because in November 2015, we had both an interim champ and the undisputed champion. So first off, we have got the current champ, Alexander Volkanovski, taking on the interim champ, Conor McGregor. This is another super interesting matchup, and I think this is probably the one that I had the hardest time deciding who I think would win, but I did end up going with Conor McGregor by knockout here because of a couple reasons. Firstly, this was like McGregor's prime, basically. It's November 21st today, so in 2015, he would be about 2 weeks out, I think, from knocking out Jose Aldo. And I mean, that was like the pinnacle, not necessarily the pinnacle in terms of popularity, because his pinnacle in terms of popularity was beating Eddie Alvarez. But in terms of like actual skill and accomplishments, this was probably the pinnacle of his career. And Volk, I mean, at this point, he is like it is a slightly washed version of Volkanovski. I mean, he's either 36 or 37. He's on his second stint as the champion, and we saw in his in his fight against Diego Lopez. I mean, obviously he won that fight pretty convincingly, but Diego was able to tag him a couple times. Like he dropped him at the end of the second round, and striking wise, Conor is worlds better than Diego Lopez. So even though Volk is one of, if not the most skilled fighters of all time, I think that with his like diminished reflexes and speed, I think that a prime Conor McGregor would be able to find that knockout shot at some point in the early rounds, and that's why I'm picking McGregor here. If we were talking 2015 Conor McGregor versus like 2022 Volk, that would probably be a different conversation because prime, I mean, I don't really know if you could pick any featherweight ever to beat prime Volkanovski, but if we're talking prime Conor versus slightly washed Volk, give me prime Conor in that matchup. All right, in the second matchup, we have got Alexander Volkanovski, obviously taking on the then undisputed champion, Jose Aldo. I mean, this is a fight that we have seen. We saw this one in, I believe it was 2019. It was Volk's last fight before getting a title shot, and I think it was Jose Aldo's last fight at featherweight. But, I mean, you'll have people that will be like, oh, Aldo was washed. That win doesn't count too much. But, like, Aldo was like 31 or 32 in that fight, I'm pretty sure. And up to that point, he had only lost to Conor McGregor and Max Holloway at featherweight. So I really don't think he was all that washed in that fight. And I mean, Volk would win this. I think pretty much any version of Volk would beat Aldo. I mean, actually, maybe not, but this is I mean, not even prime Volk, and I still would pick him to win this one just because I think stylistically this is a favorable matchup for Volk. I think that he's the more skilled, both striker and grappler. And I think that he would be able to. I mean, we saw them fight each other. Volk beat him like fairly convincingly, and I don't think that would really change because that was a pre-prime Volk taking on a slightly post-prime Aldo, and to beat Volkanovski, you really need to be able to land that huge knockout shot, and I don't think that Aldo really has the ability to do that. So give me Volk by decision here. I think this would be a super sick fight to watch. Like 5 round, their first fight realistically should have been 5 rounds since it was the number one contender fight, but 5 rounds of two of the greatest featherweights of all time would be an absolutely amazing fight. But I am going to go with Alexander Volkanovski in this one. All right, next up in the lightweight division, we've got the current champion Ilia Topuria taking on Rafael dos Anjos. Ilia, as we know, just recently claimed the belt earlier this year against Charles Oliveira after Islam Makhachev moved up to welterweight. And RDA at this point was, I believe he had already he beat Pettis. I think that was earlier in 2015, and he was coming off of his first title defense against Donald Cerrone. But, I mean, Ilia would win this fight with ease, with absolute ease. We saw RDA in his next fight against Eddie Alvarez. He got knocked out in the first round by Eddie Alvarez. If you get knocked out in the first round by Eddie Alvarez, just imagine what Ilia Topuria would do to you. Like, oh my goodness. I mean, yeah, this wouldn't even be close. Ilia would put him out badly. I mean, this is like no disrespect to RDA. He's a great fighter. He's probably one of the most underappreciated fighters in UFC history. I mean, he's a guy who fought at the top level for like 10 plus years in 2 different weight classes, fought like basically every single notable name at welterweight and lightweight. But I mean, Ilia Topuria is a special talent, and RDA would definitely not be the guy to beat Ilia. So give me Ilia by knockout in this one. All right, next up we have got the new welterweight champion of the world, Islam Makhachev, would be taking on Robbie Lawler. I mean, this is another one that would just be totally one-sided. Islam would absolutely maul Robbie Lawler. Wouldn't even be close. I mean, yeah, I picked Islam by sub. I think he could probably do it in the first round if he really wanted to. I mean, Islam, especially now that he's at 170, it's pretty clearly his natural weight class. A guy like Robbie Lawler is just not getting it done. I mean, in terms of welterweight history, the only guys who could really put up a fight against Islam would probably be Kamaru Usman and GSP, and Robbie Lawler is not that guy. At this point, Lawler was coming off of his win over Rory McDonald at UFC 189, which is arguably the greatest fight in UFC history. But Robbie Lawler's title reign, I think, is really, really overrated. He beat Johnny Hendricks to win the belt in a very close and controversial decision. He was losing to Rory McDonald before the stoppage. He won another very controversial decision over Carlos Condit, a fight that I thought Condit won. And then he got flatlined by Tyron Woodley after that. So Lawler, a guy who, I mean, obviously fan favorite, pretty entertaining fighter, but I mean, he just would not stand a chance against Islam. Islam would absolutely maul him. So give me Islam by submission in this one. All right, next up in the middleweight division, we have got, this would actually be a matchup between two undefeated fighters. We've got the current champion Khamzat Chimaev taking on Chris Weidman. This is one that could maybe be a little more competitive than some people probably think initially, because up to this point, Chris Weidman was still undefeated in the UFC. He looked like he was going to be a longtime champion. He obviously beat Anderson Silva twice. He beat Vitor Belfort. He beat, who did he beat? I think he beat Lyoto Machida. I think that was the other guy. But Weidman was still undefeated at this point. This was before he lost to Luke Rockhold, obviously. And he was a wrestler primarily, as many of you know. And I mean, because of all those factors, you could, maybe make an argument that this fight would be more competitive, but I still think that Khamzat would get it done. I mean, Khamzat is a guy who I would pick to beat probably every single every single middleweight in UFC history. I mean, he's just such a dominant force on the ground, and I think even a guy with even a guy in Weidman who has like that wrestling background, I still don't think he would be able to defend Khamzat's onslaught. So give me Khamzat Chimaev by submission here, and yeah, I mean Khamzat's just a guy. If you look at him, if you compare him historically to like every single other middleweight, I don't think he loses to any of them, especially because a lot of like the best middleweights of all time are primarily strikers, guys like Anderson Silva, Israel Adesanya. So yeah, Khamzat would get this one done in my opinion. All right, on to the light heavyweight division. We have got the current champion Alex Pereira taking on Daniel Cormier. This would be a pretty interesting matchup. Pereira, as we know, one of the greatest, not greatest title reigns ever, but one of the most captivating title reigns ever. His 2024, obviously, absolutely legendary run. We'll still be talking about that for years to come, probably. But Alex Pereira has never faced a grappler probably even close to the caliber of DC. I know Ankalaev is a pretty solid grappler, but I think his grappling's honestly pretty overrated. I think that Ankalaev is a better striker than most people give him credit for, and I think he's a worse grappler than most people give him credit for. And I mean, we saw how Alex did in his first fight against Ankalaev. He defended basically every single takedown, but I mean, DC is just a whole nother level. DC is one of the best grapplers in UFC history. And I think, especially when you because this was basically DC's prime at light heavyweight. This was while John Jones, he was on suspension at this point. I forget if it was for steroids or for like beating women or whatever it was. But John Jones was out of the picture at this point, and DC was coming off wins over Rumble Johnson and Alexander Gustafsson, two amazing light heavyweights, guys who are like borderline top 5 of all time probably. And Pereira is objectively right now, he's on his way out. He's probably only got a couple fights left in the UFC. And if you put this version of Pereira against that version of DC, I think DC would steamroll him on the ground, and I think that he would get the submission. So give me DC by submission in this one. But this would be a sick fight to see, just like stylistically. But yeah, I think DC would get it done. All right, last but not least, we have got the current heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall taking on Fabricio Verdum. Sorry about the shitty picture for Verdum. I tried to find his UFC picture, but it was super blurry, so I had to settle for the shitty PFL one. But Tom Aspinall, coming off of it was an underwhelming performance, but it wasn't entirely his fault, obviously. Got poked in the eyes, couldn't continue. And Verdum at this point this was like basically prime Verdum. He was coming off of his win over Cain Velasquez, which is still one of the greatest wins in heavyweight history. Verdum was basically, he made Kane gas out, which is insane because, as some of you may know, Kane was basically like a heavyweight version of Merab, stylistically. And this was before Verdum lost to Stipe Miocic. So I think that Verdum would give I think this would definitely be Aspinall's toughest fight of his career. I think that Verdum could definitely give him trouble on the ground. But I do think that Aspinall would still get the knockout. We saw in Verdum's fight against Stipe Miocic, his striking did not look amazing, and he got knocked out basically by just sprinting at Stipe and getting countered. So if he tried to do some stupid shit like that against Tom Aspinall, he would get put to sleep. And I think that even though, I mean, Verdum would definitely be the better grappler here, but we know Tom Aspinall is a very high level grappler, probably one of the best in the heavyweight division. It's just that we haven't really seen anybody able to challenge him in there. But I mean, he's got the submission win over Volkov. We've seen that he has a very strong ground game, and like a lot of his base is in jiu-jitsu. But I think that Verdum could maybe give him trouble early, maybe steal like a round or two, like the first or second round, just by controlling him on the ground. But I think that Aspinall would find the shot eventually. I think Verdum has too many holes in his Verdum had too many holes in his striking game to be able to stand and bang with a guy like Tom Aspinall for too long. And I think that Aspinall would find the knockout shot eventually. So give me Tom Aspinall by knockout in this one. Overall, I think that the champions today definitely have an edge over the champions from 2015. There are a couple guys from 2015 who I think would win, like Mighty Mouse, Conor McGregor. But overall, I think that the current champions are definitely better as a whole, and I think that they would win most of these matchups. All right, that's the video for today. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these matchups, or if you think there are any other like historical matchups between former champions that you think would be really interesting. I'd definitely be down to do another video like this one. As always, leave a like on the vid, subscribe to the channel, and thank you guys for watching.